Okay, so here we are in paragraph 3, and you can see that there's a T-chart at the bottom of your page here. It's one side says problems, and this side is always going to be from the text. Whenever you are using a T-chart, um, the left side is usually from whatever text you are reading. That's just the rule of thumb, so it can be organized and everybody will know where you're coming from. So instructors will always think this part right here is from the text. So any problems that you're having, you can list here. And then I've labeled the next side of the T-chart strategies from your head. So the strategies that we talked about in the last slide will be the ones that you're going to be thinking about as we read this paragraph, okay? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using annotation as a strategy here to keep track of how to figure out what this text is about, all right? And so that means that we are going to be looking for islands of known. What do we already know, and how can we put it together in order to make meaning for this paragraph? That's what we're going to be doing, okay? So first of all, I'm just going to read it and I'm going to annotate it and I'm going to think through it. So you have some strategies to try on paragraph 4, which you're going to be doing for yourself, okay? So here we go. A word about food. Okay, so I already know about food. I like food. I'm hungry right now. So I'm keeping track of my thinking, right? I'm hungry. Maybe for pizza, right? Who's not hungry for pizza? Everybody's hungry for pizza. So a word about food. In the simplest of terms, there are 2 kinds of organisms. All right, so now that I have read most of this, the rest of this part of the sentence, I know that this is not going to be about pizza, because this organisms, there are 2 types of organisms. That tells me that we are not talking about going out to dinner, making, any kind of recipes, or ordering pizza. We're talking about organisms. And I know what organisms are, but I don't use the word organisms all the time in my everyday life, right? I don't go around saying, how are the organisms today? I don't do that. But I do know that these are living things. So I'm just going to keep that here. Oops, living things. And I'm going to annotate for that, because even though I know what organisms are, because it's not something that I use in my everyday life, I'm just going to put it down so I don't have to remember it anymore and I don't have to figure that out again. All right, so the other thing the author did for me here is the author gave me a little clue of what to look for. The author said that there are 2 kinds of organisms. So I know that as I'm reading, I need to find 2 kinds of organisms. Sometimes authors will say there are 6 steps or there are 5 examples. And you get to the end of the paragraph and you only found 3. That gives you a clue that you need to go back and find the other ones, because sometimes you stop paying attention as you're reading. So I am going to make sure to put a box around the 2 kinds so I know that I have to look for that. And now I'm going to reread because I've been talking to you. All right, so a word about food. In the simplest of terms, there are 2 kinds of organisms. Those that make their own food, and I think that's the first kind, right? Those that make their own food, usually by photosynthesis. And again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I don't work with plants, but I know what photosynthesis is. This is about plants, right? And they make their own food. I know that, but I'm going to write it down so I don't have to remember, okay? So usually by photosynthesis, right? Those that make their own food, and that's what photosynthesis is, out of the sun, right? And so there we go. And then look at this. The author has given us this parentheses here in these brackets. The author gives us this word, autotrophs, and then defining autotrophs, self feeders, which totally makes sense with the photosynthesis, right? So if I were in a biology class, because I'm assuming that this is about biology, because, right, cells and stuff. If I was in this biology class and I saw the brackets and I saw that there was a vocabulary word that I didn't know that was defined, I would write those down in my notes, because I think that any instructor who's going to be testing me on this, they wouldn't be calling it, okay, and then the organisms that make their own food. They would say autotrophs. So that's something that I'm going to need to pay attention to. This is a new vocabulary word. Okay? Right? So have I had any problems yet? The only real problem I had is that I was off base when I started. So I'm going to put that down as a prediction problem. And how I solved that was I revised that prediction. When I got organism. Right? So that's how I did that. I was making a prediction, it was a wrong prediction, and then I revised the prediction. So that's where we are so far. All right. Now we have a connecting word, and, right here. So a word about food, in the simplest of terms, there are two kinds of organisms: those that make their own food, usually by photosynthesis, like plants, autotrophs, or self-feeders, and those that depend on outside the cell source. So this is my second type of organism here, right? Those that depend on outside the cell source. So I'm going to have to read it between the lines there. Outside the cell source means that they eat things that are not part of, like they don't make their own food, like they have to go and search for food, right? So I'm going to just remind myself of that too. They search for their food, right? And then again, here are those nice parentheses and brackets. And here's another vocabulary word, heterotroph, which means other feeders. Okay? And that's our first sentence. So I'm going to keep track of this. I'm going to put new vocabulary here. And I'm going to list them here. Autotroph, self-feeder. And then I'm going to even define that more for myself. Feed, makes their own food. That's what I'm going to put. And then heterotroph, other feeder, search for food. Okay, so I'm keeping track of these. They are my vocabulary that I need to remember. All right. The autotrophs, see, now they're using that vocabulary, right? So it's a good thing that I'm keeping track. The autotrophs include a few kinds of bacteria, some one-celled, and I can never say this word very good, so I usually ask a student to help me with this, but I think it's, oh, I don't even know, eukaryotes, I don't know. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to say that word very well. They're protesians though, and all green plants. Now look at this, all green plants. I was right, so I'm gonna put a little C that I confirmed my prediction here that it's about plants, right? Because I knew about photosynthesis. The heterotrophs encompass most bacteria, many protesians, all fungi, and all animals. So I am a heterotroph. And that's a text to self, right? Because I'm an animal. Because this chapter is about animal nutrition, attention first will be given to examining the nature of food, then how food is made available to cells. So this is a really nice like preview of what the chapter is going to be. So this author is really helping us understand what this paragraph is about, okay? The only thing that that I'm having trouble with right now is more vocabulary that's not defined. And so that is, I don't know how to say it, but this one. And I know some of you know how to say it. I understand that. And I wish you were here with me in my house so you could pronounce it for me, but you can't. I'm not sure what proteagens are. I know what bacteria is. I know what fungi is. So these are things that I would have to look them up. Okay? So this wasn't that difficult of a text because I really paid attention to the things I already knew, and then I was making connections for that. Okay? But do you see what the strategy was to get through the paragraph? Was really to use my annotation in a very specific way to keep track of what I know and then to extend my knowledge. Okay, so I'm going to have you do the same thing for paragraph 4. Paragraph 4 is on the next page. I also have paragraph 4 linked by itself in the content area on the web page for difficult texts. And it would be really, I think would be a really good idea if you printed out just paragraph 4 and tried this out to try and get through paragraph 4. And then I want you to just do the best you can, linking what you know to try and understand what the topic and what the paragraph is about in paragraph 4. All right, so I'm sure I'll give you more like the same directions on the next slide because I repeat myself, but I hope this helped give you a visual of what you're going to be doing with paragraph 4.